There was a sky once wide and endless and filled with questions, and beneath that sky stood three women who had answers written in the language of numbers and courage. The world around them was divided by lines of colour and silence, but their minds stretched far beyond those lines, reaching for the stars that most people only dreamed of in whispers. There was a time in America when dreams had rules, and those rules were written by men in offices and by history in ink that erased the names of women, especially women whose skin carried the warmth of the sun in the early morning light. The streets hummed with engines and radio voices, spoke of war and progress and the future. Yet for many, that future was not meant to include them still. They believed still they rose, the story begins not in the roar of rockets, but in the quiet rhythm of chalk against a blackboard where a young girl named Katherine Johnson looked at numbers the way others looked at poetry. Her mind moved faster than the words around her, and in those equations she found a kind of freedom that the world could not take. She lived in a place where schools were separated by colour, and where a girl's brilliance was seen as a delicate thing easily ignored, but Catherine's brilliance was a force of nature. She counted steps and stars, she saw the invisible patterns that held the universe together, and even when the world tried to make her small, she kept expanding within her. Dorothy Vaughan walked through the same world, but her path wound through corridors of calculation and quiet strength. She was not only a mathematician, but a leader, a woman who could see what others missed, the future, the machines, the shift that would come when humans would have to teach machines how to think. She studied the codes that would later define a new age, and though her title said temporary, her presence was permanent. Mary Jackson was the third of them, fiery, determined, unafraid to question the walls that surrounded her. She saw injustice and faced it head-on, with words, with work, with the steady grace of someone who knows that history is not kind to those who wait. These three women were pieces of a larger constellation, unseen, uncelebrated, yet essential, and their light began to glow just as the nation looked toward the stars. NASA was not yet NASA. It was a collection of dreams and fear and ambition, bound together by the urgency of a race not just against the Soviets, but against time itself. America wanted to touch the sky to prove that its reach was limitless, but beneath the polished surface of patriotism there lay a contradiction. How could a nation so divided by race aspire to unity among the stars, and yet within that contradiction, these women found their purpose. Their work began in small rooms filled with pencils, papers, and endless calculations. They were called computers, women who computed because the men who built rockets needed answers that only precision could give, and these women gave them that and more. In Hampton, Virginia, the Langley Research Center stood like a beacon of progress, though its halls were marked by signs of segregation, coloured restrooms, coloured entrances, coloured coffee pots. The irony was heavy. Here were minds that could calculate the trajectory of a man into orbit, yet they were denied the right to sit beside him at the same lunch counter. But they endured. They endured because their eyes were fixed, not on the walls before them, but on the heavens above. Each morning, they walked through the gates holding their heads high, their notebooks pressed close like shields, their hearts steady like engines in motion. Katherine Johnson's desk became a place of quiet revolutions. She calculated trajectories for test flights, her equations so precise that they became the language of trust. When John Glenn, the first American astronaut to orbit Earth, was preparing for flight, he asked for her by name. "Have the girl check the numbers," he said, and in that moment history tilted slightly toward justice. Her calculations would define the path that carried him safely home. Dorothy Vaughan, meanwhile, had seen the future in the glow of a new machine, the IBM computer, cold, fast, unfeeling, yet full of promise. She learned its language before anyone asked her to. She taught herself, and then she taught others. She turned fear into knowledge, and in doing so, she protected her people from being left behind. Mary Jackson challenged the system from within. She wanted to become an engineer, but the path was blocked by laws written to keep her in her place. She went to court and won the right to attend classes at an all-white school. She walked into those rooms where no one wanted her and sat with the calm certainty of someone who knew she belonged. The years rolled forward like waves of change. The space race grew. Fiercer, the headlines louder, but in the background the rhythm of these women's work never faltered. Each number, each line of code, each late night spent, verifying data was a step towards something greater. They were mothers, daughters, sisters, dreamers. They cooked dinners, checked homework, and then returned to calculations that would change the course of history. They lived double lives, unseen but indispensable. When the rockets finally roared to life, their sound carried echoes of every silent struggle endured on the ground. The air at Langley filled with tension and pride as countdowns began and the nation held its breath. The astronauts were heroes, their faces on magazines, their voices broadcast across the world. But behind those faces were hands that wrote the equations that made the impossible possible. And though no camera turned to capture the women who did the work, their legacy shimmered quietly like starlight, unseen but eternal. And yet this is not just a story of mathematics. It is a story of humanity, of faith in one's own light. Even when the world insists on darkness in their journey, we see the mirror of our own endless climb to be seen, to be valued, to rise above the boundaries drawn by fear and prejudice. And so, as the rockets ascended through the clouds, the hearts of these women soared too, carrying within them the knowledge that every dream, no matter how small, begins with the courage to believe that you belong among the stars.